Welcome, 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 everybody. And as you can see, I have a fascinating gentleman sitting before us today, whatever time zone one's reaching into this through. William Henry, who I've been metaphorically searching for around the planet. And we were just sharing in the pre-show chat that, I would arrive in the Temple of Hathor and I would meet somebody who would say, "Oh, are you Stuart Pearce? I've just been with William Henry," and our paths had crossed. So I'm very excited, as you can see. I think the expression is super excited that I'm here in conversation with William, whom I admire for his remarkable work and contribution to our lives. That this gentleman has a refined way of consuming in his own way the vital ancient mysteries and reminding us of the uniqueness of how they can be applied in this time of ascension. So, thank you for being here, William. It's absolutely amazing.
Oh, it's my total pleasure. Thank you, Stuart, very much. And I'm grateful for everybody's attention and this opportunity to just have this exchange. So thank you so much.
Bless you, bless you. So, ladies and gentlemen, you're all thinking, so who is William? I'll give you just a few sentences. And I just want to remind you, ladies and gentlemen, that this is actually a deep dialogue. It's not a presentation. So you will see that we will be moving through organic, authentic conversation. And William's a gentleman, so he's really up for that. Thank God, because that's the ethos of the podcast. So William is many things. He's a polyglot, actually. But William is an author, an investigative mythologist, an art historian, and he teaches pervasively through the human potential movement, particularly through a wonderful, there are many, many books that William has written, but this particular book, Ascension, which is in the Common Sentience series through a wonderful, wonderful publisher. So please make note of this. We'll be referring to it all the way through. But of course, it doesn't stop there, because William is also a consulting producer for the Global History Channel concerning ancient aliens and a number of other really great things like the Lost Science of Ascension. And Arcanum, I believe, that was another process that you went through, or produced rather. So I could go on and on and on and on, and we will make sure that his website is clearly defined for you as we reach towards the end and completion of our conversation, which I hope is the first of many, so that you can find your way to him. And I really do recommend, don't do it now, listen to our conversation, but I really recommend that you go to his website, because it's one of the most beautiful websites that you could ever imagine existed in relation to mind, body, and spirit. And you have a great eye, sir.
Thank you.
Your photographs are absolutely amazing.
Thank you. I love capturing those moments and being able to share it with people as well. I think that's one of the great privileges we have with these wonderful supercomputers that we have in our hands now, to be able to take video and photos and share them instantly. And it's really quite remarkable.
Yeah, yeah. So, William, where did it all begin? When did you actually start? Were you conventionally working within the corporate world or within teaching, and then suddenly you saw the light? What happened?
No, I think I was very fortunate as a teen, 19-year-old. I had moved from Detroit, Michigan to Nashville, Tennessee with my family. My father was in the music business. He had a record label, and he bought a massive catalog of songs from CBS, a major company. And I was there to do research to find out who wrote the songs and who owned them and this kind of thing. And I decided I wanted to be an entertainment lawyer, kind of follow in Dad's footsteps, sort of thing, work in Nashville, work in Hollywood. And in Nashville, there was a small Southern Baptist college that offered an entertainment music business program. You'd have professors from Music Row, all the executives at the labels and producers and musicians would come over and teach us. And I'm a guitar player, musician, so I'm very interested in music. But the catch was you had to take Bible study classes. And I knew nothing about the Bible. In our home growing up, the four apostles were Waylon, Willie, Chris, and Johnny. Waylon Jennings, Chris Christopherson, Johnny Cash, and Willie Nelson. I mean, that Sunday morning it was break out the records and here's the gospel, right? And so as a 19-year-old, I'm in a sophomore sociology class, and the professor assigns us to go find a book, a new book, whose implications would impact Christianity, write a 3-page review. This is
Mhm.
1982. So off I go to the local bookstore, and here's a brand new international bestseller. You can probably guess the title: Holy Blood, Holy Grail. The crucifixion was a hoax. Jesus and Mary Magdalene were married. They had children. The church knows all about this. They exterminated 1 million Cathars in the first European genocide. There's a tiny hilltop village in southern France with all their secrets. And I'm looking at this thinking, wow, this is absolutely incredible. Oh, and angels came down also. And there's this bit about human transformation.
Yeah.
So I write a 44-page review of the book, and I'm flunked. And not only flunked, I'm invited to continue my education somewhere else because this was a Bible believing school. And so I became an autodidact. There was something in that book, a power pack, a jewel, if you will, an attractor that I had to know more about this. I want to know what was the original religion of Christianity? Why did they want all of this to be swept under the rug, if true? Most of the Holy Blood, Holy Grail's premise was a little bit fanciful, but there was enough of a core line of truth there that here I am now 40 years on and 40 plus years on and still following the same path. I've been to that small hilltop village in southern France, Rennes-le-Château, a couple of dozen times. It led me to Egypt. It led me to all of these wonderful mysteries that have now culminated in my passionate interest in ascension and human transformation.
Amazing, amazing. So you will work through inspiration. And it seems that there are two very specific values there. How, firstly, your curiosity as an investigative mythologist was awoken. So there was that wonderful left brain awakening. But at the same time, as we both know, that you're reading very unusual, unconventional material, but something deep within you was awoken. What was that depth and what was awoken? Why did you
Well,
believe it?
I think, early in my 20s, I early on realized I wasn't going to have children. I knew that. So that was part of it. I mean, maybe what was awoken was memories of past lives and priesthoods or monkhoods or priestess or priestesshoods, whatever, and recognizing, hey, this is a real calling, and it just drove me. And you mentioned earlier something about my voice perhaps being different than other authors. Many authors are compilers of information, as am I. But as I read other works and I compare it to my own sense, I feel like I'm really looking for something. And that drives me. And that's really what was awoken then, that there's something I left behind within that story. And I want to find it. I'm still finding pieces of it. And that's what just keeps it so exciting.
And of course, your interest, and which is why I call you a polyglot or a polymath, is actually very myriad, which is fascinating because that's the natural instinct of curiosity that we're trying to find as a soul seeker a particular crucible or emblem or dimension, or is it a being that is speaking with you?
I think it's all of the above, actually. I mean, it's symbols, it is artifacts, it is seeking the light beings and the avatars, and it's a knowledge that I will one day find them, and I'm on the path of preparation at all times. I'm not arrived by any stretch, and that's what gets me up in the morning. And when the boots hit the boards in the morning, it's all about this. This is the order of the day.
Wow. And so there is this compelling desire for information, to be informed, for transforming and translatable aspects of your consciousness. But it seems that there's also an immense faith that each morning you will get up and something will present itself to you.
Absolutely, and as with many, when you start on the path, a very important aspect of that, a reassuring aspect of it, is the synchronicities that come along, and those, of course, still drive me today. But I do recall early on that sense of wonder. It's like, wow, how can that be? Look at these two things match, or I'm in the right place at the right time, and such happens.
Mm,
That's, it was always part of the path as well.
mm, mm. And I would love to go deep into the nature of the way that you see ascension
Mhm.
as a metaphysical and multidimensional state of being, but how I love the way that you talk of the light becomes outer. So the light that we already have is
Right.
revealed on the outside.
Right. And I didn't set out to get into the light body teachings and that line of thought. I mean, as I look back, I realized that when you're talking about angels coming down out of heaven, they are light beings. But that also happened pretty synchronistically. I mean, I had been in Egypt in the early 2000s, and well, let me go back to 1998. I had seen a photo that Graham Hancock's wife Santha Fail had put up of one of the star walkers at the Temple of Hathor at Dendera on the ceiling, on the astronomical ceiling, the astrological ceiling. And here's this figure, Sahu, Orion, on the arc of the millions of years. And when I first set eyes on that, I said, that's a wormhole. And the guides in Egypt used to laugh at me when I would talk like that. And now you go into like the Temple of Hathor, like, yeah, there's the guy on the wormhole boat up there. But that was really quite synchronistic. And as I kept pulling on that thread, it led into the mid 2000s. A beautiful couple approached me at a conference once. They both had PhDs from the Harvard Divinity School. They worked for the Dalai Lama. Their specialty was translating Tibetan texts relative to what the Tibetans referred to as the rainbow light body or the great perfection. And they asked me if I knew anything about it. And I said, no, I haven't ever heard of that before. And they said in a sentence that essentially the Tibetans believed that our body was designed to have its frequency accelerated until it dissolved into 5-colored rainbow light, leaving behind only hair, toe, and fingernails. And the couple then said, well, we've always wanted to know that once the lamas attain that rainbow light body, then they can project themselves to any one of other 12 or 13 star systems where this teaching is taught. And they wanted to know, how do they get there? And then they said they were watching one of my presentations about the Star Walker on the wormhole boat at Dendera, and they said, that's it. The body becomes the wormhole. The inner becomes the outer becomes the inner. And that sent me off on a whole new axis of research that continues to this day. And I'm consider myself very fortunate to be somewhat of a, not just an advocate, but almost a forerunner in this genre of authors who speak about this and have tried to put this together. And I've since now linked the rainbow light body, of course, to the Egyptian resurrection mysteries of Osiris, the Christian mysteries of resurrection. It's all the same thing. And this teaching isn't Christian. It's not Egyptian. It's not Tibetan. It's cosmic. It's the universal cosmic teaching that we're all striving for.
Yeah, yeah. And, if I may say, that you speak of it and also write of it. I mean, the wonder and the mystery of opening up the rainbow white body, dealing with the Antakarana, moving to the phenomenon of the wormhole. And I'd like us to just specify in a moment what you mean by that, so that I know what you mean by it, but so that anybody listening can understand more about the solar barges or the transcendental barges that we see in the temples of Egypt, the star temples. But it seems that you also have this wonderful ability to be able to reach deep into the mysteries, and it speaks to you, it reveals to you information that you and I know has been sub rosa. I mean, it's a medieval term, of course, as we both know. But was also, the rose was obviously an emblem that was taught all the way through the mysteries of the East, that we call the Middle East. Far East, I'm not that aware of. It was much more to do with the lotus, which, of course, as we know, reappears in Egypt as well. But if you go to the very core of the nature of your awakening with that, there seems to be implicit belief, faith, and trust that the serendipitousness of discovery, the synchronistic nature of identity is leading you all the time. It's almost as though you have a magical talisman that keeps reappearing for you, and
Mhm.
you adhere to it. Whereas many people, particularly from the academic world, would be skeptical and cynical and wouldn't necessarily follow the breadcrumbs in the way that you do.
It's very true, and I did make a conscious decision in my work. Also, I was very fortunate when I lived in Nashville to live just minutes away from the Vanderbilt University Divinity Library, where they had the most amazing collection of esoteric and occult books, especially Jewish mysticism, the works of the Essenes, and so I have always striven to reach up to that academic level to bring that information down that's often obscure or not popularized. But you're right. I mean, there is a voice. There's something perhaps driving me that puts it together a little bit differently than others do. And I appreciate that when people acknowledge that and say, hey, this has been very helpful to me, because I've always been service orientated in this area. I mean, I started writing because my books were my own notebooks, and the notebooks became books, and that then became a service for others who don't have access, for example, to a Vanderbilt Divinity Library or other of these texts. So, perhaps it's some inspiration, but it's also a desire to bring all this together. I mean, we are so fortunate and so privileged in our world, not only the cameras that we talked about a moment ago, but the access to information that has simply not been available for, in some cases, many thousands of years. And I want to take advantage of this moment while I can.
Mm. And it seems that you're doing that. So it's absolutely wonderful. Dare I say that I believe that the uniqueness of your writing and indeed of your presentation is that the information comes from your heart and not just from your head.
Well, thank you. And I will pass on. I often get that when people are in my presentations that, it's like a spirit takes over. And I can acknowledge that. I can't attribute it to anything. It's not training. It's just passion for the subject and excitement to be able to share it. Those are certainly tones that are in there. And maybe there's something else going on as well that I'm not quite aware of yet.
Well, it's the excitement, the
Mhm.
passion of the excitement of the passion. So it illuminates the whole conviction of what your interior is all about. And, what I see is this wonderful childlike, not a childish, but childlike
Right.
verve, which you and I know keeps us young,
Absolutely.
keeps us inquiring. And after all, I mean, I don't know where you are at chronologically, but I this year I turned 70, and it
Wow.
feels to me that I've just begun.
Right. Oh,
And
yeah.
I know that these 30 years are
Mhm.
going to be quintessential, not just for our own solipsism, our own personal journey, but also because of the way that we are caregivers and curators of extraordinary information that we need to awaken to through
Mhm.
initiation so that we can present it in the world in a formative, entertaining, magical, but deeply integrous way so that people get it. Rumi says, if words arise from the heart, they enter the heart.
Mhm.
If words arise from the tongue alone, they don't pass beyond the ears, if it's just pure cognition. And of course, as we know, that vibrational field is very open within the academic,
Yeah.
in academia.
Right.
I've always
Right.
approached that from the entertainment industry point of view, but I was a teacher of an experiential form of training actors' voices. And then at Shakespeare's Globe, I was asked to be an ambassador for the project. And most of it was going into the great universities in the US and masterclassing or lecturing on the substance of the Renaissance, the Elizabethan Renaissance.
Oh, beautiful.
So I would meet all of that fervor of intelligence and actually realize that I don't really know very much about that because I'm not an academic. And they were totally surprised. But how is it that you have the information? Just as how is it you have the information? Because the heart leads us.
Right.
And isn't it wonderful how spirit allows us to stumble over things? I mean, for example, the artistic director of Shakespeare's Globe, this wonderful actor called Mark Rylance, was invited to go to a Biennale in Florence to speak about the substance of Shakespeare in relation to the Renaissance. But he couldn't go because of some reason. He was rehearsing a play, and he said, "Would I go? Would you go, Stuart?" And I said, "Well, what an honor, but what will I talk about?" He said, "Do your thing. Talk about the Renaissance voice." And I thought, how can I do this? So obviously it had to be couched in the teachings of Shakespeare.
Right.
So I chose the statement that Hamlet reveals, which is, "What a piece of work is a man, how noble in reason, how infinite in faculty, in form and moving, how express and admirable, in action, how like an angel, in
Wow.
apprehension, how like a god, the beauty of the world, the paragon of animals."
Mm-hmm.
You see, it's a summation of what we've just been talking about in another context.
In 10 lines, exactly.
And there are 7 degrees there.
Mm. Wow.
And of course, as we know, that portal key, number 7.
Uh-huh.
And so then I thought, I wonder what Leonardo da Vinci was thinking. And I discovered the 7 tenets of da Vinci's philosophy that are a mirror image of what Shakespeare was writing.
Wow.
Anyway, so then begins another, really interesting journey into, well, what was the authorship of those plays?
Well, I should mention that the other book that I had my hand on back in 1982 when I picked Holy Blood, Holy Grail, the other book was The Mysterious William Shakespeare, and who actually was responsible for all those works. I mean, I know you likely have, you spent a lifetime studying that, and you can spend lifetimes trying to master that subject.
Yeah. Have you met Alan Green?
I have not, no.
Ah, maybe you need to meet Alan. Alan has spent the last 20 years as a cryptographer going deep into the geometry of Shakespeare's writing, the iamb, and the way that, for example, the sonnets are 14 lines, and it was a creation of the man called Shakespeare, and has discovered clues to the authorship.
Oh.
Through the geometry of the way that the verse is literally printed on the page in the first folio.
Wow, how interesting.
Yeah, I think you'd be fascinated.
Mm-hmm. Who did he say it was, just out of curiosity? 3 people.
Edward de Vere, the Earl of Oxford.
Okay.
Francis Bacon, who I believe was the reincarnation of Thoth.
Oh,
who, by the way, introduced himself to me when I was 15 in Egypt, my first time in Egypt.
Oh, wow. How interesting.
In Habu, suddenly this being stepped forward.
Wow.
As a child, I was very open to the multidimensional universe, but sort of kept it under wraps because I talked about what I was seeing when I was a baby, and people thought I was mad. So my mother said, "Darling, I think you need to keep this quiet." He was this extraordinary being stepping forward, the master stepped forward and revealed to me the substance of Habu.
How fantastic. Gosh, that's wonderful.
I was only 15, 16, and suddenly everybody had left the temple. And a guard, one of those wonderful guys, picked up his jalabia and said, come. And we climbed up the broken masonry onto the roof of Habu, and he took me to the second architraving, and there was the wormhole, and there was Thoth, and there was Sishat.
Oh my gosh! Wow, how incredible!
So I knew that was where they traveled from astrally, through the use of Merkaba, through the use of and so suddenly I saw it all in front of me.
Wow. Well, I'll be at Habu in just a couple of weeks. So I'm going to have to scamper up there and see if I can.
If you can, because they're fierce because of the broken masonry. I guess it's to protect all tourists. Blah blah blah.
Right.
But if you can, you have an interpreter, do you, with you?
Yes.
Maybe he can find a way of seducing the guards.
Right. Wow.
Best of luck, because I've always wanted to get back up there. I've always wanted to go way up over the interior gateway. So now that you can do that at Tendera, it's so wonderful. And I had the experience also at Edfu of doing that, which they won't allow anybody to go up, but I was the only person there once, and they took me down into the subterranean chambers as well as up.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I actually was fortunate to go up there once as well. Nat Geo went to the Temple of Horus at Edfu with me for an episode of their series, Atlantis, Is It Real? And I knew when I was up there, it's like, this might be the one and only chance I'm going to get. So
Yeah.
better enjoy it.
Yeah. Anyway, so slightly off piste, take us back onto piste. So remarkable encounters have taken you into another flurry of inquiry, and you brought forth in amazing realizations about the transformative process that we humans are going through at the time. I mean, that the Gaia is going through. Just to affix everybody's consciousness, was there one particular experience that flooded you with such inspiration that you knew that you were in love, as it were?
Well, one that immediately comes to mind is the first time I was in the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid. I really didn't quite know what I was doing there, to be honest with you. I thought I had made the biggest mistake of my life in going to Egypt. I wasn't prepared for the third world country experience and wasn't as tapped into the Egyptian mythology as certainly as I am now. And so we go into the King's Chamber, as most groups do. We had an opportunity, this is like 2002, to do some meditation work. So I slide my back against the granite wall and I just take stock of where I am. The center of the landmass is the planet, the most astounding structure on planet Earth. I'm in a granite resonance chamber, and I just close my eyes and just think, well, what can I do? Oh, I'll just start sending love to my family and friends and all around the world. And then here comes this blue eye out of nowhere, just beaming bliss at me, smiling at me. And then there's another one, and I see these just faces that are beyond ancient. They looked almost Native American, deep wrinkles, in their faces, and so ancient. And again, I can't say there's a transference or a transmission, but there is just this sense of total awe and wonder. They're just beaming bliss at me. And we get out of the pyramid. Freddie was with us. In fact, Freddie Silva was with us. And I said, did anybody see that blue eye? And they're like, what are you talking about? And it wasn't until we got down to the museum shop in Luxor, and I see this little 2-inch tall pyramid with the blue eye of Horus right smack there where the King's Chamber is. And I'm like, that's it. That's what I just saw. And I knew at that moment I was going to spend the rest of my life unraveling what just happened, because I came to view that blue eye of Horus as sort of like the software or consciousness of the pyramid. Yeah. And that is what actually started to lead me into some of the wormhole ideas and so forth, because there's physicists that talk about these super advanced civilizations that wouldn't send out generation starships. They'd send out lasers that could then turn into peepholes that are looking for conscious entities. And if they find a conscious entity, they can expand into the size of a wormhole, and a being from that other advanced world could step through it, or a human could step into that portal. Yeah. And I realized that was what I had experienced. And gosh, if I could have that moment back.
Yeah. So this is the talisman that I was seeing. And I was seeing the Eye of Horus, but I wasn't going to say that. I was waiting to see if you would. So there's a wonderful point of synchronicity that you're being led through that extraordinary wisdom. And I want to share this with you because it is interrelated, because we are talking about the origins of that extraordinary spiritual mythology of Egypt, going all the way back into Atlantis and the Shemsu Hor, which Freddie and I were also talking about when we had a deep dialogue. I worked for 3 years with a Native American elder in New Mexico who claimed me in Taos. On Taos Pueblo, this man claimed me and thought that I was one of the Tewa, but I don't have the mark on the base. They have this birthmark on the base of the spine that most of the Anasazi nations do, they who came from the skies. And one of the first initiations is that he took me into Kiva, which was 13 feet below, just he and I, and below the mesa. And he closed the trapdoor, and it was pitch black. And he started chanting, and the whole place lit up.
Wow.
And what I saw was the blue eye of Horus here. And that was the light that was shining. It wasn't his eye, it was blue. And of course I gasped and probably said fuck or something. And he carried on chanting.
Mm-hmm.
And then a stillness arose that was still fully lit. I mean, the kiva, which was 13 feet in diameter, 13 feet in height, the whole place was just shimmering with light.
Wow.
Then the stillness subsided, and we moved back into whatever this level of consciousness is, so to speak. And I said, how did you do that? And he said, well, we have techniques which I will teach you, which he never did, of chanting through here and awakening phytoluminescent chemicals, which is where the light comes from. But it comes from the Great Father. I said, who is the Great Father? I will give you the name. He only wrote the name, interestingly, because they had this sacred credo about not writing, because it would solidify past and present, past and future into the moment, rather than allowing flow to take place. But he wrote Horus. So I suddenly realized, of course, that's how so many of the artisan priests had painted all of those extraordinary buildings, those sacred buildings, and of course, particularly the tombs. It wasn't just to do with a bronze disc shining light into another bronze disc. They actually chanted, so you can actually hear many of the chants. Well, at least I hear them astrally. I can hear the chants, Anyway. But that was an extraordinary experience of yours, and it led into all sorts of extraordinary opportunities, but a great gift from a spiritual father of yours.
Yeah, it truly was. I mean, it opened up, this avenue of wormhole consciousness and recognition that we are attempting to become an interstellar civilization, and there's a fixation that we'll be able to do this through some sort of technology. But the technology is spiritual, and the vehicle is our body, and that became really clear. And that was something that was not a well-trodden thought back when I first started presenting on that idea. But now we're starting to embrace that, and that's exciting. I think transhumanism is driving us inward. We're recognizing there's a bifurcation. The Hopi spoke of this bifurcation. Other traditions have said humanity's going to reach a crossroads, and we're at that crossroads now. And it's going to be very difficult, I think, to embrace the transhuman technology and the light body technology at the same time, but perhaps we will find a way to harmonize those two things.
The angels are talking to me in a very specific way at this time. I don't know if you know that in 1987, I met a group of angels on Glastonbury tour.
No, how exciting.
Out of the blue. So that was a big awakening for me. And effectively, for the last nearly 40 years, I've been teaching their technologies to do with miracle mindedness, which is why I'm so familiar with all that you say in relation to the light body and all the other impulses that you're referring to. Oh dear, I hope I haven't lost you just for a moment. You froze for a moment. Not your fault. I think it's to do with the Wi-Fi. Or maybe we were taken into a moment where suddenly time was arrested by the unseen beings that are evidently overlighting our conversation. They're teaching at the moment through a series of transmissions where I channel them, that we, and a number of other people I know are saying this, that we are about to meet a band of photonic energy that is building copiously, being built by a new light species that is really coming from the multiversal nature of superclustering galaxies. This is going to hit the ionosphere, or at least caress the ionosphere of our planet, and that we will move into 3 days of outage as a result. And what that would provide us with is an opportunity of going into the darkness, of penetrating the void within, so that we discover the gene of Isis, we discover the genesis of our own souls, and particularly that moment of incarnation when we chose to enter these bodies, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So it feels that all of these roads from yourself, myself, all of our brothers and sisters who are teaching or awakening this, that we're all moving towards a very extraordinary point of quickening, where it's easier, apropos what you were just sharing, it's easier, delete that there is a bridge where we can suddenly feel that the internal light technology is something that we are apparent through our senses of it taking place.
Mm-hmm.
Then we will join, because after all, love is right at the core of it, into divine unity consciousness. And we will literally come together as communions of light to bring about, well, the thesis is vast, isn't it? Starting off by arresting and healing elements within the Gaia, and then going deep into Agartha and talking to our star brothers and sisters. Anyway, there's a lot of information there that they're giving me in transmissions, which we're calling radiant revelations.
Raising revelations.
Radiant.
Radiant, pardon me. Radiant revelations. Yeah, beautiful.
It's all about it. I use light language, so it's all about radiance, illumination, enlightenment, light up, you know.
I get it. Yeah, I always get such inspiration from any text anywhere that's talking about just a mass dosing of humanity, be it with a light or one that is perceptible to our senses or not, a new vibration. This is what has to happen. And to hear you talk about beings that are actually engineering that is very comforting, because when you hear that, you think, well, how could this be possible? How could this collective awakening, simultaneous, or possibly even spontaneous awakening occur, if not without the help of others that are helping, making it happen?
Indeed. And I've seen precursors of this. I mean, for example, I was invited by the UN to go to Gaza to run a workshop for aid workers. And I had to steel myself. I mean, this is
Recently?
a few months ago. Yeah. So
wow.
It's since last year's October the 7th. And the master was there helping me all the time. And the eye of Horus was there. So I was being led in what I needed to do, which was essentially a chant workshop. I'd done a project with the UN before where there was a tremendous alleviation within the aid workers. These are Red Cross and UN workers that are experiencing so much battle fatigue and PTSD that most of them are terminally constipated, you know. So I was there to create flow. and 85% it has actually, they are now
flowing. That's fantastic.
However, I won't go on with the story because it's quite extended, but there were moments where transcendentalism came in and we were able to actually release many of the spirit that they had been responsible, the dead bodies that they're responsible for. The spirit was attached to them. So we were able to actually create altars to all of the dear departed ones that they could remember. And hundreds of spirits went off into the vortex. And I was given this premise, which was fascinating, of that the healing will come through supernatural aid. And I believe that that's really what we're talking about, you see. All of your work will illuminate a path that will allow this transcendental conversation to happen between us all, but also between superior intelligence that exists within star systems.
Yeah, and I do believe we do need that preparation. We've got to put those magic glasses on in order to be able to perceive and understand and experience what is indeed unfolding. It has a parallel in the UFO disclosure movement here in America, where people are pushing for the US government to disclose what it's been covering up the past 70 years. And it's all well and good to want that, but again, the people have to be able to have a place to put it in within their consciousness, a way to appreciate, a way to understand what's going on, and then be able to enter into their consciousness with it and live in that new reality. So that training, that preparation is absolutely vital. And that's the phase that we're in right now, I think, in large part.
Yeah, I feel it so. And of course, the training that we're really talking about is how we embody a technology, isn't it? That's really what we're talking about.
Exactly.
It's not just an idea. It's
No.
what happens within the body. And, one of the great things that I'm leading people to is that we're losing a feeling literacy. I know that you're very aware of this because of the way that you keep showing us beauty.
Mm-hmm.
The images that you either photograph or the images that you use, they just are celebrations of beauty, peons of beauty.
Yeah.
And of course, we know beauty is an emanation of the divine. So it's awakening us to these trajectories. I'm speaking too much, and I want to hand over to you again. We need to go back to all that you were sharing in relation to, so you were seeing the blue eye in the king's chamber, and this led you to the understanding of what the solar barges are all about and how they really work.
It did. It helped me to start to piece that together, and then also recognizing that, as Paul says in Acts, flesh and blood can't inherit the kingdom of heaven. So that means there's a transformation, there's a transfiguration that has undergone preparatory to that. So what I've been working on is matching those transfiguration teachings, going back to the Egyptians, working through the Tibetans, through the Jewish and the Christian tradition, and then recognizing that is the preparation for ultimately embracing this star walker or wormhole consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Could you perhaps give us, I know we don't have an illustration, which is unfortunate, but of course, as soon as everybody goes to your website, post this conversation, they'll be able to see your symbolic logo, which is
Yes.
of the master, as I call him, and of the Eye of Horus, so they'll be able to see it. But could you perhaps describe it to us, that how the awakening within your consciousness took place when you're looking at those extraordinary frescoes in the temples?
Right. So, I mean, you're told that this is Sahu or Orion. I call him Captain Orion. He is on his arc of the millions of years, and he's traveling towards Orion on this boat. And of course, the Egyptians were obsessed with this idea that they could alter their consciousness through sometimes prayer, meditation, breath work, entheogenic substances that would enable them to perceive the gods. And the gods also rode upon these boats. And so their quest going back 5,000 years was to create this ark, this ship of eternity, and recognizing that they were ultimately going to cross over into the field or dimension of the blessed on this boat, literally traveling upon the Milky Way in a physical sense, but also spiritually as well. So with that understanding, I'm realizing that this boat isn't an ordinary boat. It can only be what we today call a wormhole, a traversable wormhole. And it's just utterly incredible that the way the Egyptians portrayed that boat, it had papyrus or lotus blossoms at each end of the ship. And maybe you can see my hands here. Say that's on one end is the ship, or the lotus blossom, and then you have this U-shaped boat with another blossom on the other end, and it precisely matches the way modern science portrays a wormhole. And so that was the impetus, that was the inspiration for then linking this concept. And then as it evolved, you will see images of pharaohs, Ptolemaic kings, typically at Dendera. They'll be sitting on a feathered ascension throne. Feathered because it flies. It's their ascension vehicle. It's their Merkaba. He holds the Uaz scepter, which is looks like a tuning fork because it actually is a tuner or resonator of the Holy Spirit or cosmic energies. And in the case of my logo, he's holding a star in his hand, which is a star, but the Egyptian word for star also means door. So this is he's on his boat. He's tuned in, he's resonating with the highest frequencies of the universe, and he's opening a star door. And it's fun how that became my logo. Was I was in a deep meditative visionary journey in a otherworldly version of the Egyptian temples, and a divine feminine presence was on a throne. It's like a mermaid. I distinctly saw like a mermaid's tail shimmering, purple, green, blue, just absolutely gorgeous. And this voice says, William, your work in Egypt with those star boats is beautiful. And I'm like, well, thank you. Yeah, and how do you know about that? Right? Kind of thing. I'm just somewhat taken aback. And she says, no, it's really beautiful. And then she says, you know that you know that photo you've been trying for years and years and years to take in that sarcophagus in the Cairo Museum? And I'm like, yeah, I know exactly the one you're talking about. It's a sarcophagus that belonged to a figure named Marin Ptah, and it shows Nut with her body full of stars on the interior of the sarcophagus. And then way up in there, where you just can't take the picture, is this guy, Sahu, on the boat. And she goes, "That's you." And I'm like, yeah, I know. I've spent my whole life searching for these mysteries and researching this. And she goes, "No, William, that's you." And it went in. And I realized, yeah, I'm not Sahu, but I am a star walker. And so is everybody listening. And this is the idea, is that we've come from elsewhere, and we need to then gather the tools here to continue on our journey. And so this is what became the beginning of my Star Walker event program that I launched this year and will continue to develop in the coming years.
When is the next one?
It's starting in November. November. This is late October.
And you'll be in the US or in Egypt?
It'll be online. It'll be
online.
Okay, yeah, after I get back from Egypt. So I'll be sure to let you know. Thank you.
I have to be there. I have to be. I can't tell you what's happening in my body as you reveal all of this, because I have thus far, other than an extraordinary Sufi wisdom keeper that I met in Egypt, I have not had the joy and the adoration of this conversation, but I've been feeling it and thinking it. So it's like coming home, hearing you speak.
Oh, thank you, Stuart. I'm very touched by that.
Very excited, because I've been going to Egypt for 50 years as a pilgrim, running retreats there for the last 20 whatever. And, I always stay on, like you, I'm sure, at the end of a retreat, so that the people go home and then we can just bask in the mysteries. And I always stay in Luxor at the Sinesta St. George, so that I'm right on the Nile, as you know, and there's the valley that calls me inexorably. And so they speak to me, and extraordinary things have happened, where spirit has come, as it has with you, particularly meeting the high priest and being introduced to all of that information about Akhenaten and Nefertiti and Meneptah and Tutankhamun. Anyway, that's another story, which I wrote the book Angels and the Keys to Paradise, because he gave me the keys to paradise. He showed them to me in Tut's tomb before the door was opened. I was taken there astrally. So timelines were jumped, et cetera, et cetera. However, so this is a great joy. And I want to take us back to the nature of translation, the nature of transformation, and how we can provide meditative skills or principles of spiritual technology that are very gentle, that people who are awakened by what we're sharing, and I feel that many will be, I hope that's not too vain for me to say that, but this is an exciting conversation. Can you share with us what experiences you've ascertained are useful for the awakening of the light vehicle?
Well, I specialize, as we've talked, in art as a conduit. And this is something actually I learned from the Tibetan rainbow light body tradition. When the Dalai Lamas would learn to awaken their divine light body, there were no texts, there were no teachers. They would take them behind the Potala Palace in Tibet when they were still there. There was a circular room that's now actually been recreated in the Rubin Museum of Tibetan Art in Manhattan.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's 360 degrees around, and it's all images. It's all images of various lamas and gurus in the rainbow light body. And they teach the same thing that the Gnostics taught about early Christian icons, that the icon, the image, will show us the way. And we can enter into the divine realm through the image. And the idea is that through what we would today call quantum entanglement, these avatars can transmit the codes of these of the ascension body, of the light body, through these images. I mean, literally, the first Christians would set up an altar and they would place an image of Jesus transfiguring on top of the mountain before Peter, James, and John, and they were taught to open their mind, open their consciousness. Maybe there was some psychotropic wine involved that can enhance this connection, but this is how these teachings were taught, and I really took that to heart, and I started to see it across traditions that art, sacred art, the utilization of images is a form of meditation, and that became my specialty. And then I layered onto that the neuroscience that's involved of activating the mirror neurons in our neocortex. We're hardwired to become what we see. And you attach feelings of gratitude to that, and now you have a very valuable meditative tool that anybody can use. I mean, anyone can, after finishing our conversation, can Google Tibetan rainbow light body and find a rainbow light body image, put it on your phone, put it on your computer, and think about it however many times a day, and bring in that gratitude and the exuberance that comes from activating that light body. I mean, on my own phone, I keep this image of Athena. Let's see if I can pull it up for you here. That I took in Nashville. It's not coming up. I apologize. But how many times a day do we look at our phone and we might have our picture of a loved one on it, or our cat, or whatever? But here's an opportunity. A couple hundred times a day is the number of times the average person looks at their phone. Here's a reminder to say, no, this is what is within me. This light being is what is within me. It's manifested this physical flesh and blood body as a vehicle for incarnation, but my true divine nature is this light being that's already within me. I've just been covered up. It's very much like, what was it Michelangelo said? I saw the angel in the marble and I just set it free. Yeah. It's the same kind of idea.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm hearing a number of trace elements here that are really crucial for people to reference. Firstly, we all got to go to the Rubin Museum in Manhattan and sit in that room. And I do remember that room. I was taken into I nearly broke into the Portola Palace at 5 o'clock one morning in 1980, whatever it was, the early 80s, when I was given money. I was given a grant by the British Council to start writing a thesis, which would have been interminably boring, the sacred and secular purpose of the human voice.
Oh, wow.
It then transformed itself into something much more accessible, which was my first book. A raging dyslexic wrote my first book, The Alchemy of Voice, which is all about the transformative properties that we have within our voices, some of the elements of which we've been discussing. However, so I remember seeing that room. I escaped the Chinese guards staying at the Hilton Lhasa, joke, and found my way to the Portola. And as I knocked on the door, and the door opened, the little spy hole opened, and this monk let me in and showed me the Holy of Holies. I mean, really extraordinary. And an hour and a half later, of course, we were surrounded by guards, and I was severely reprimanded. Who cared a flying fuck? I'd just seen the Holy of Holies. However, we go to the Rubin Museum. We also find your material. What can you lead us to? What book, or indeed, is there an aspect of your website that we can go to for the sacred images?
Yes, you can go to my website, williamhenry.net. There's the search function, and just type in rainbow body or rainbow light body. Right. And there are a number of examples there comparing, for example, the resurrection images of Jesus on a rainbow or enfolded within rainbow colored light to the Tibetan images. And that's a very good place to start.
Right. Beautiful. And they presumably can be they can be screenshot so that people can have the image and laminate the image or whatever and put it on their altars. Because the most important thing we're referring to is the transmission of light through visual cortex, and
Yes.
how that begins to awaken the pineal and the pranic cord, so that we can begin to feel our light body, our dense body becomes lighter, and then the mystical, metaphysical experiences start happening.
Absolutely. It's so powerful.
Meditate, 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 meditate. I don't
Right.
want anybody else saying to me, "Is meditation important?"
John Van Eyck was an early alchemist. Some say he was the inventor of oil painting. And I've also got one of his images of Jesus on my website where he's fully illuminated wearing the halo. But even more, his hands, and I put my hands here in the center, are filled with light. They're literally glowing orbs of light.
Right.
And what I would do is I'm trying to activate my inner healing abilities. I would just literally put my hands up against his, and through that Reiki transmission type of effect,
Yeah.
there would be a transference. And I encourage people to incorporate this in your practice. It's something that everyone can do, especially if you've had a Reiki attunement or if you've been developing any of your healing abilities.
Absolutely. Fantastic. And also through sound, because through sound we can open up transcendental corridors of light, as an element of the cosmos, that we have on our planet in all sorts of extraordinary forms, light downloading into color, color into sound, and they're the formants of matter. Anything specific in your books?
Beyond that, I highly encourage, one reason I wrote the Ascension book is because I had noticed that beginning in the 2000s, the term started to come into vogue and people started using it. And I would talk with people and it kind of became apparent to me that they thought it was a new concept. Like, this is something we've just started doing within the past few years. And I feel like an appreciation of the at least 5,000 year history that humanity has been scaling this ladder is vital to our ascension, because as you're reading about it, I mean, let's face it, all of us have had past lives, and you're going to perhaps be remembering some of those lives. You're going to realize you are on a solid footing. And it may be that in your own ascension process, it's not the contemporary teachers trying to get you to shift from 3D to 5D that you're most going to resonate with. It might be the traditions in Egypt of Isis and Osiris. It could be Sumerian. There could be a Tibetan dynamic that really appeals. And so my book is a chronology more than it is anything of these past ascension teachings to see we've been working on this a long time, and that we should recognize the privilege that we have and the honor that we have at this time to be able to advance these teachings, because that's ultimately what we're doing.
And I want to vouch for that as well, because in reading it, spending 2 hours before we came into conversation reading, it is a beautiful compilation of some really what I refer to as being exotic facts, meaning, really supernatural identities that come through and that you write with such ease and such flow. So they're beautifully grounded, allowing us all to see where the parallels and the extrapolations can take place, but not in any overly cerebralized way, and just in this really, really gentle fashion. If you were to define in a sentence the nature of ascension, what would it be?
I've come to view ascension as a quest for wholeness, holiness, and ultimately perfection. That is a word that I used like a golden needle to thread my way through various traditions. And perfection doesn't mean you're going to become like this perfectly beautiful person as we think about it in our terminology today. Perfection actually means to be more whole, more wholly complete, and compassionate. And that is something that everyone can do. I mean, when you talk about weaving the robe of light, it's woven of strands of light, but it's also woven of acts of kindness, compassion, patience. These are they call these the paramitas or perfections in Tibetan Buddhism. And it's a recognition that ascension isn't a spontaneous one-off event like rapture. It is actually a day-to-day process of awakening and raising, in our vernacular, raising our frequency, raising our vibration.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. I love it. And so, unfortunately, we're going to have to complete. Can you believe it? Where's they are gone? So we're talking about always choosing the highest choice, which is why you surround yourself with such beauty. So, this is highly commendable. I want to thank you from the very core of my being, the very depth of my soul. This has been an amazing deep dialogue, and hopefully people will also feel the enthusiasm as you take us into this, wonderful, wonderful arena of energy that you open, which is, of course, multiversal, but it has a container, which is William Henry. So thank you so much.
Oh, it's been my absolute pleasure, Stuart. I hope we can continue our conversation sometime in the future.
I hope so. I hope so. And so, if I may, ladies and gentlemen, namaste, namaste, namaste. And please write in the comment box, in the comments below on YouTube or wherever you may be, give us some feedback on what you felt about the conversation, as well as being adulatory. Of course, you're going to say how much you love us both. And William, please stay where you are for a moment while we close down, because I'd love to thank you personally. Okay. So Ryan, thank you so much.